at precisely 7 in the morning on a bright Tuesday. I stood at the register of my favorite neighborhood bakery with a warm latte in my hand. The cashier tapped her screen, gave a puzzled frown, and politely informed me that my card had been declined. I offered her a second card, but that one failed too, leaving me standing in front of a growing line of impatient strangers feeling utterly humiliated. I walked out into the crisp air, pulled out my phone, and called my daughter. She picked up right away, and when I mentioned the cards, her voice turned unnervingly calm. She casually explained that she and her husband had cancelled them because I was getting older, and they felt it was time to simplify my life. Before I could even process her words, my son-in-law took the phone and chuckled patronizingly, telling me that if I needed cash from now on, I just had to ask them first. I felt a cold shock travel down my spine as I realized they were treating me like a child who could no longer handle her own life. Instead of screaming or arguing in the middle of the sidewalk, I forced myself to take a deep breath, said 4 quiet words, and hung up the phone. I did not drive home to mourn my lost independence. Instead, I turned my car around and drove directly to the main branch of my local bank, determined to find out how much of my life had been altered without my knowledge. I had lived in our quiet town for over 30 years, raising my daughter in the same modest home where my husband and I spent our happiest decades together. Since losing him to cancer 4 years ago, I had built a simple, peaceful routine centered around my gardening, my routine errands, and spending time with my 2 wonderful grandchildren. My daughter lived 20 minutes away, and because I was never very good with modern technology, I had trusted her when she offered to help me set up online banking a few months back. I believed she was looking out for me. But sitting in the bank manager's office that morning, the terrible truth finally began to reveal itself. The manager, an old friend who had known my late husband and me for years, looked deeply concerned as she brought up my account details on her monitor. She quietly showed me that the primary phone number, mailing address, and contact email on my profile had all been changed to my daughter's details earlier that week. Replacement cards had been requested and sent straight to my daughter's house, leaving me completely cut off from my own funds. I stared at the screen in complete disbelief, unable to comprehend how the little girl I had raised with so much love could perform such a cold, calculating betrayal against me. The bank immediately brought in a specialist from their fraud prevention team to review the sudden administrative changes made to my files. The specialist showed me digital authorization forms bearing my signature, granting my daughter and her husband full control over my hard-earned assets. I had never signed those papers, and seeing my name forged on official documents made my blood run cold. The specialist gently explained that this kind of financial takeover rarely happens overnight, but rather through a series of small, calculated steps disguised as helpfulness until the victim is completely trapped and rendered helpless. That night, I sat alone in my quiet living room staring at a framed photograph of my late husband on the mantelpiece, searching for clarity. I remembered how he always advised me to stay calm and analyze a problem thoroughly before taking any drastic action. I decided against calling my daughter to confront her right away, realizing that throwing an emotional tantrum would only make me look unstable and play directly into their hands. I needed to understand the full scope of what they were planning before I made my move. So I made an appointment with my family lawyer for the following afternoon. My attorney, an experienced and pragmatic man who had handled our family affairs for decades, listened intently as I laid out every strange detail. He reviewed the bank documents and immediately noticed that my daughter had referenced conversations regarding my legal capacity that had never actually taken place. He leaned back in his chair and solemnly asked if my family had mentioned moving me into an assisted living facility recently. My heart sank into my stomach as I remembered my son-in-law casually handing me glossy brochures for local retirement communities over the past few months, always wrapping his cruel intentions in sweet, fake concern. My lawyer warned me that gaining control of my daily finances was usually just the first phase, before attempting to declare an aging parent legally incompetent. A few days later, he uncovered even more disturbing news, revealing that my daughter had secretly contacted a real estate agent to evaluate the current market value of my home. The realization that my own child was measuring my life for liquidation hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Every corner of my house carried cherished memories, and I was not about to let my family strip away my dignity or force me out of my home. My attorney advised me to play along for a little while longer, acting entirely unaware of their schemes so they would drop their guard and reveal their full intentions. Acting like a confused, submissive mother was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew that strategy was my only defense. When my daughter and her husband brought takeout to my house the following evening, they spoke to me in slow, soothing tones as if I were fragile and helpless. I nodded along with their patronizing suggestions, letting them believe that their subtle manipulation was working and that I was quietly surrendering to their control. Over the next weeks, I carefully documented every single interaction, keeping a detailed journal of every phone call, coercive comment, and unexpected financial restriction. I called my daughter before making ordinary purchases, recording her increasingly controlling responses as she questioned whether I really needed new garden tools or a weekend getaway. Meanwhile, the bank's security department continued their internal investigation into the forged documents, gathering ironclad proof of illegal administrative access. Every piece of paper I saved and every note I took was building an unbreakable wall of evidence that would soon protect my freedom. When the morning arrived to finally end the charade, I invited my daughter and her husband to my lawyer's office under the pretense of discussing my long-term future. They walked into the conference room with confident smiles, fully expecting me to sign over my power of attorney without any resistance. Instead, they were met by my attorney, the bank manager, and a terrifyingly thick folder containing every record of their forged signatures, unauthorized account changes, and documented attempts to seize my property. The color instantly drained from my daughter's face as the overwhelming reality of what she had done finally crashed down upon her. My lawyer calmly outlined the severity of their actions, explaining that we had enough evidence to press criminal fraud charges if they did not step back immediately. They attempted to offer weak excuses about just wanting to protect me, but the documented evidence completely shattered their deceptive facade. I looked my daughter directly in the eyes and firmly told her that she would surrender all access to my accounts, return every document, and never attempt to control my life again. Seeing the utter determination in my eyes, they realized they had completely underestimated me, and they signed the full revocation papers in total, humiliated silence, walking out of the building into the warm afternoon sun. A profound sense of relief washed over me as I took my first true breath of freedom in weeks. I drove back to my house, unlocked the front door, and stood in the quiet hallway of the home I built with my husband. I knew my relationship with my daughter would never be the same, but I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. Standing up for myself showed me that age does not make us helpless, and true strength lies in refusing to let anyone erase our independence.